And a good Thursday morning to you. I am Aaron Nolan. Welcome into News Nation. Now, last night, for the first time as president, Joe Biden addressed Congress. Kelly Meyer joins us now from Washington, D.C. to break down that speech. Obviously, this was a thing that the president usually does, and then you have the results of a Republican Party who sounded off as well. Kelly, good morning to you. How did the president do? What were some of the key touching points of his speech?
Yeah, well, it was just such a fascinating speech just because of the unique setup of it, just because of the COVID restrictions. It was almost like, as someone referred to it here in Washington, like a dress rehearsal. Sorry, as my Zoom camera falls here. Let me just take this off. I'll just hold it here with you guys to recap.
We got to love technology, Kelly. Unfortunately, you can't be here in Chicago with us at the News Nation studio. Kelly working from Washington, D.C. Camera falls. We keep going, Kelly.
We keep going here. So basically, he really spent much of his speech in the beginning talking about jobs, infrastructure, trying to sell still that first bit of his infrastructure plan, not really just to Republicans because they're pretty much already made up their minds, but to the American people who were listening and watching at home. So he spent much of the speech on that, but also introducing the now second part of that proposal. Now, the first part is still, trying to sell that to the American people. So that's still not yet passed. Now he's introducing the second half that has to do more with families and, things like unemployment insurance reform, expanded Affordable Care Act, premium tax credits, things like that, things for schools. So more of human infrastructure in this part of the package. So we did talk about that. It was interesting, we were given guidance that this was only going to be about a 40-minute speech. And then it turned into an hour 5. So it went into the 10 o'clock hour. So it wasn't until maybe just the last 20 minutes of the speech he actually hit on things that for reporters here in Congress were interested in, like what's going to happen with police reform, what's going to happen with Voting Rights Act and H.R. 1, what's going to happen with gun reform. And he called for all of these to get done. And for police reform, he called for that to get done in the next month. What
was the rebuttal from Republican Rick Scott?
Yeah, and that's someone who is working on the police reform bill for the GOP in the Senate. So it was interesting to hear from him. But really, when Biden came out, just to go back to him, he, of course, talked about the success over the COVID-19 pandemic and the vaccine. So when Senator Tim Scott came out, the Republican from South Carolina, he credited what President Trump did, former President Donald Trump did, to overcome the pandemic, to getting the vaccines going, crediting Operation Warp Speed. He hit Democrats for not letting kids back into schools, something that Democrats have been criticized for, about, not letting kids back into the classroom because of the pandemic. So he brought that up as well. And just trying to touch on the unity that they could create in this moment, but really hitting at Biden for his speech right out of the gate as he gave his response there last night.
Kelly Meyer joins us from Washington, D.C. here on News Nation, talking about President Biden's 65-minute address to Congress. He did bring up some proposals. Let's run down a few of these. You can find more about these on newsnationnow.com. And I want to start with, for students, the president proposed a universal preschool for 3- and 4-year-olds, as well as 2 years of free community college to all Americans. How does he expect to get these two issues for students done?
Yeah, and this is something he's going to need the help of Congress on to get passed. So a big question for us is, he has this, like you said, it's a $1.8 trillion stimulus plan. The first part is, I believe, over $2 trillion. So these huge feats. So I think what he's going to do today, where he's going to Georgia to, celebrate his first 100 days, he's going to start selling this to the American people, hoping that if he could win them over and show that there's bipartisan support, then he could get this through. It's similar to the strategy they used for getting the COVID-19 American Rescue Plan passed. When they were asked about no Republicans supporting it in the House and the Senate, they said, well, look at people across the country support it. The constituents for those lawmakers support it. So that's where we see bipartisanship. So it's an interesting strategy. They're going to see if they can make it work. In the meantime, Democrats are going to keep pushing for it here on Capitol Hill. But something interesting that's not in there, and I know you noted there on the website, is that what's not included is cancellation of student debt, which is something that Democrats, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, has been really pushing President Biden to do. But that is not in here, to the disappointment of many people who still have student loans to pay.
All right, we're talking about proposals that was put forth last night by President Biden during his address to Congress. Kelly, one thing that we talk about, and I think everyone understands when it comes to political parties, taxes is one of those divisive issues. It pushes you to the left or it pushes you to the right. What was suggested last night from the president was increasing the top tax rate, but also extending child care tax breaks. So a lot of tax talk in yesterday's speech.
Yeah, and that's something that, Republicans already knew their response to, but, they kind of were prepared for what they wanted to say to that. They have come out here saying we don't want to see any kind of tax hikes. And some things that his plan, at least what I know from the first plan, was involving was some changes to what former President Trump did. And some of the Republicans' highlight of the past 4 years was their Jobs and Tax Cuts Act, I believe, of 2017. So this would undo some of that. So that's something that Republicans don't want to see happen. So what he said at the end of the speech, though, which was very brief, and I think I maybe wanted to hear more of it, was trying to extend that olive branch and saying, listen, if you have other ideas or other strategies, come to me and let's work it out. We know President Biden has said all along that he wants to be bipartisan. He was known for working across the aisle with Republicans when he was a senator. So he had that chance last night to be back in that room that he was in for so long and reach back out to him. And I wanted to hear more from him on that, to just say, you might not like what I'm pitching here tonight, but let's get together and see where we can meet in the middle and get something done.
Kelly, one thing that I noticed, as you mentioned, bipartisanship, was who was in the room last night. Talk to me a little bit about which politicians were allowed in. During some of the pictures that we're showing on your screen, you see Democrats standing up applauding, Republicans sitting down and not applauding. So who was let in? How many were there? Usually this is a packed house.
Yeah, I caught up with some senators before they went in. I talked with North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis, who was on Capitol Hill, but didn't go to the speech. He said due to COVID restrictions. We saw Florida Senator Rick Scott was in there. We saw the Georgia senators were in there, some moments for them. We saw Lauren Boebert was in there, of course, McCarthy and McConnell and Schumer. So it was interesting to see who got a seat and who got inside, but it was just such a limited number of people that he was giving this speech to. And it's a moment that I'm sure President Biden was waiting for so long. And then to give it to a barely packed room, I'm sure was just such a weird moment. But like he said in the speech, he was really giving this to the American people, for those watching at home. So he really wanted to make sure he got that message across. So not so much about who was in the room, although there was not a big crowd. He was hoping for bringing out the crowd at home.
Kelly Meyer joins us here on NewsNation now. Kelly, we have talked about what was in the speech. We've talked about the proposals. We've talked about who was at the speech. But I think one thing that a lot of Americans are focused on right now is COVID relief, COVID vaccinations. Mm-hmm. Where did the president say we are in the midst of now the second year of a pandemic?
Yeah, he really highlighted the next phase, hopefully, that he wants to move into, is that they have the vaccines and they are getting people vaccinated, and highlighted that I believe at least half of Americans have at least their first shot. So he really highlighted this triumph over the pandemic, but just still encouraging people to get it. Because now I know that, and with all the reports we've been doing, that this is the time where they have to reach the people who maybe aren't so sure about getting it, and reaching this hurdle or this hill that they have to get over to making sure that everybody gets the vaccine. So they're really pushing for that too, and just hoping to get back to that sense of normalcy. But again, really looping it back to his pitch on jobs, which relates back to his infrastructure plan about getting people back to work. So he really kept bringing it back to jobs and the economy and just how they have to get America back in gear. But he was saying that they are back and they're ready to keep moving in that direction.
Kelly, one thing that we saw several days ago, a week plus ago, was the conviction of Derek Chauvin in the trial of George Floyd's death. U.S. Senator Tim Scott said in his rebuttal to this speech from the president that America is not a racist country. That's a quote from his rebuttal to the president's speech. What did the president have to say about race relations?
He
absolutely addressed this in his speech last night, not only from the inequities that COVID-19 addressed, but also openly addressing police reform and really calling on Congress, like we said, to get that done next month, which was big news for us trying to watch this progress of this bill, saying that this has to be tackled, and that, America just has to take the next step on this. And it was something that, we saw last week, and I can't believe that was just last week. Obviously, so much has happened since then. But, there was some criticism for President Biden saying he hoped the right verdict was made right before the verdict did come out. So he drew some criticism for that, but he was saying that since they were already sequestered, that it was okay to say that. But then you obviously heard his conversation with the Floyd family afterwards, saying that, this can't bring him back, but here is some justice. And then he hopes to deliver more justice by signing a police reform bill named after George Floyd into law. So he's really encouraging Congress to get that to his desk.
Kelly, as we wrap up, we've heard from Senator Scott, we've heard from President Biden. What are other politicians saying? How did it go for both Republicans and Democrats who you've heard from, whether it's on social media or spoken to directly?
Yeah, we're definitely going to hear more about that today. Of course, you get the slew of statements in your inbox following it. It's almost like they have them ready to go and hit send as soon as the speech ends, of course. But I think for Republicans, it was a lot of what they were expecting. Even Senator Tillis, when I talked to him before, he said, yeah, I'll be watching, but I'll likely be opining on what he has to say. And, they know that they already don't like the infrastructure package. So I think for anything he said last night, I don't think it really changed their minds. I think they have to come together on the pay-fors and how they're going to handle that to see if they get a path forward. And for Democrats, I think they felt it was a great speech and that, President Biden really hit on all the things they wanted to touch on, from the pandemic to the jobs to infrastructure to the things happening in Congress, and to, keeping, I don't know, just moving it forward a bit for them, and taking the next step and moving past the Trump administration, and looking beyond that. So I think for them, it was a big moment. Obviously, there's a lot of news articles too about having the two women behind President Biden for the first time. You see that everywhere. I think is all over my Instagram and Twitter this morning, seeing Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Vice President Kamala Harris behind him. So that was a big moment as well.
I believe Biden said that it's been too long coming, that this was something that was supposed to be put into place a long time ago when he mentioned that he introduced Madam Speaker and Madam Vice President for the first time.
Absolutely. He said, no president has said those words before, and that needs to change. It shouldn't have taken this long. And that was a notable moment right off the top of the speech, and just really incredible to see two women there. Regardless of party, it was a beautiful moment for that.
Kelly Meyer, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time out of Washington, D.C. Give Kelly a follow on Twitter.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
All right, you too, Kelly. Have a great one. Kelly continues to work for us here on NewsNation from Washington, D.C. If you don't know about NewsNation, we encourage you to search us out. Go to newsnationnow.com on the upper right-hand corner. Put in your zip code if you're on a desktop, and we'll tell you exactly how to watch us. We get things started at 5 o'clock Central, 6 o'clock out on the East Coast with Early Edition, and the next 5 hours is devoted to news from around the country, and we're going to tell you this news in an unbiased fashion. It is not our job to steer you to the left or to the right. That's your job. You make your own decision. We're just here to give you the news. I'm Aaron Nolan. Have a fantastic Thursday morning.